in my practice, I help people understand, what is your biosensor? Is it your skin? Is it your vision? Is it tingling on your hands or feet? Is it poor coordination of your hands? Is it your foot drop? In my face, it's my face pain. For some folks, it's their anxiety level, their depression level. Now, mental health is difficult because we typically don't have very good insight. So now I'm going to have to rely on my spouse saying, honey, you are just way too crabby for normal for you. But if I can get people to be dialed into their biosensor, now I can say, my biosensor's turned on. What was the trigger? Or I could say, wow, my biosensor has turned down. What's the trigger for this really great day?
Welcome, Dr. Terry Wahls. This is such a pleasure for me because I've been following your work for such a long time. And I have to say, you are nothing short of legendary in the functional medicine space. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for all the work that you do and for your incredible story, which I can't wait to dive into today. So, first of all, how are you doing? How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. I had a lovely morning, went out for a brisk Nordic hike through the neighborhood. So great way to start my day. Then I had a sauna, cold
Mm.
shower, and then started meeting with my research team.
Oh,
So
lovely.
all sorts of really fun things are happening so far.
Oh, lovely. And we were just talking just then about how, everything that you're doing, which we're going to dive into, is just so exciting, and it's going to be game changing for so many people across the world. And you get so excited that you have to meditate before you go to sleep. And
Oh gosh,
I
yes.
just is that every night or just some nights?
Most nights, and I have a little gratitude practice. I like to visualize. I pick some time frame in my life, and I'm thanking people or my animals or places that have given back to me. So I might start with my childhood, thanking my horse, my dog, my pony, my parents for a particular act of kindness and love. Or I might be thanking my research mentors or my patients or my spouse. And again, I visualize a particular uh, uh, act of generosity, and I'm thanking that person. And that's a really lovely way to fall asleep at night.
Yeah. I think gratitude is one of the most powerful things that anybody can practice, because once you focus on gratitude, there's not much to be angry for.
Well, and we know biologically our a number of molecules, inflammation molecules, decline, and so your inflammatory cytokines diminish. So it's a very anti-inflammatory, healing state.
Mm. I think it's a nice practice to do it in the like every day at some point. So my
Mhm.
gratitude practice is usually in the morning. I have to say I've been skipping it recently, but after this conversation, it's reminding me. It's like how important gratitude is and how important it is for your health. Like it's not just some namby-pamby practice. Like it's really important for your for
It's
your
very
well-being.
beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, I really enjoy kind of looking at your work, and especially on Instagram, because I'm on Instagram all the time, and I just love your profile. And so many videos on cooking and what you're eating that day. It's just so interesting. Recently, you posted one about kimchi, which I'm interested in trying myself at some point.
You know, and so what people see is, so I eat a lot of fermented cabbage, kimchi, sauerkraut, and we have a variety of recipes. And you'll see that I'll have a big salad. I'll just put my kimchi or sauerkraut on my salad. And you might see that I have a skillet meal of vegetables and whatever
Mhm.
meat. and I just put my kimchi or sauerkraut in with a skillet meal. And if I have soup or a stew, I ladle my soup or stew, and then I put my kimchi or sauerkraut in the soup or stew, and it adds a lovely flavor to the soup or stew. And for families who are trying to get their children to add a little kimchi or sauerkraut, this is like a very easy way to sneak it into their diets
Mm-hmm.
and get familiar with that taste.
Right. Um, I suppose if someone is going to be eating just, food as it was meant to be eaten, like vegetables and plant foods and animal proteins, like it takes some adjustments, especially if somebody
Absolutely,
is
it
used to
takes
the supermarket ready meals and.
right. It, and your microbiome has to get used to it as well. So you start
Mm,
with just a small forkful, and then you could gradually increase the amount. Some very interesting research that looks at our ability to change your microbiome. Because if you take a probiotic capsule, you can detect the microbes in your stool. Um, as long as you're taking the probiotic capsule, as soon as you stop, it disappears. If you add fermented foods, and or if you add fiber, as long as you have the more fiber, you change the microbiome. But you stop the fiber, it goes back to your previous microbiome. If you add fermented foods, and we're talking 6 servings a day,
mm-hmm.
so that's, you know, like 1.5 cups.
Of
So
fermented
1.5
foods.
cups of kimchi. Like I eat 2 cups a day.
Yeah.
That's no problem whatsoever. 2 cups a day of sauerkraut. A pint of kefir or a pint of yogurt, preferably without sugar in it.
Yeah.
That's really pretty achievable. Now, for most folks, you have to start with a forkful or a spoon
Mm-hmm.
and work your way up gradually. But in the studies that use that 6 servings,
Yeah.
and you have that for 6 weeks, and then you stop, you've changed, and then you collect your microbiome before, during, and after, and you continue to have these new microbes even after. So we have reconstituted your microbiome in
Yeah.
new ways. And I want to remind everyone that so our species appeared about 250,000 years ago. About 100,000 years ago, we learned how to cook, and we learned how to ferment food.
That's right.
And we, when we moved to out of equatorial Africa, and when we started storing our food, we could do that through fermentation.
Right.
So we've been eating fermented food as a large part of our diet for 100,000 years. It was when we created refrigeration
Mm-hmm.
about 100 years ago that we stopped eating so much fermented food.
Right.
It, and I think that's been to the detriment of our health.
Would you say fermented is the proper way to eat plant foods and
Well,
is whatever you can ferment it? Would you
so
say that?
my what I teach my clinicians is, ideally, you'd like to have half of your food raw, half of it cooked, and half of it fermented, sort of
Mm-hmm.
for your vegetables, in a really big way of thinking about it. Now, you still have to consider, does the person have a clinical reason that they can't have raw food?
Mm-hmm.
For example, people with inflammatory bowel disease probably have to have soups and stews. Do people have evidence of histamine intolerance, so they won't do as well with
Mm-hmm.
fermented food? So I still have to make clinical decisions about, can they tolerate, do I have to personalize this and have more soups and stews, less raw,
Right.
less fermented food? But in general, I'd like to have people work towards having more raw food, more fermented food, and make those changes at a pace they can tolerate.
Right. Right.
A really simple way of thinking about this is, are you pooping rocks, logs, snakes, pudding, or tea? If it's pudding or tea, you need less fiber.
I love
If
this. It's
it's
so different from what we're usually taught
if
as
it's if it's
nutritionists.
rocks,
I'm gonna
if it's
take your
rocks, you need
approach.
more fiber.
Yeah,
And if
right.
it's getting into your pants, you need probably less fiber.
Yeah.
You know, and many people with severe neurologic disorders have difficulty controlling their bowels and they're having more urine and fecal accidents. And so those people are reducing their fluid intake because they don't want to be peeing in their pants.
Hmm.
And they are reducing their fiber because they'd rather be a little bit more constipated so they have fewer accidents. And we have to figure out how to help people manage their bladder and bowel so they can have their daily life.
Right. And I suppose the raw foods that you're speaking of, is that for the enzyme, like for powerful enzyme activity? And because only because I'm reading a book about enzymes at the moment, a classic, Enzyme Nutrition. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember that
yes,
book.
that's a
Yes.
lovely book.
Yeah.
And you know, fermented food has a lot of enzymes in it. Fermented food has a lot of vitamin C in it.
Mm,
Fermented food has more bioavailable minerals in it,
mm,
and has many of the polyphenols, antioxidants that have been acted on by the microbiome. Uh, so again, really super helpful nutrition
mm.
that is more bioavailable.
That's right, because our digestive systems are pretty basic in comparison to, let's say, a ruminant who has many stomachs to process plant
Yeah,
foods. So we need all the help we can get, right?
and you know, another thing that I think we could all be a little more humble about is life's been around, you know, on this planet. We think 3.5 billion years, and multicellular organisms have been around about 700 million years.
Mhm.
So the single cellular organisms have been around for far longer than us.
Yeah.
And we are really a collection of single cellular organisms, viruses, bacteria, single cellular protozoa, yeast, fungi. You know, and when I was a youngster, I remember some science fiction books that talked about these living spaceships that would go from galaxy to galaxy, and the pilots were had relationships with the giant spaceship that was going from galaxy to galaxy. And what I want your listeners to understand is we are the spaceship. The microbes are maybe the pilot, and we now know that the microbes can influence our behaviors,
Yep.
influence our dietary choices to feed them and starve out their competitors. And so we are much more of a collaborative being than we realize.
Right. I find that fascinating too. So when you're having, let's say you're in a bad mood and you're blaming external reasons for it. It could be that your microbiome, the bacteria, are just like, come on, we
They
need
had their
some.
way with
Yeah,
you. They
they
got you to
have
eat
their
all
way
that
with
sugar.
you. That's right. Yeah, that it could. I found it incredible how your microbiome is so closely linked to your mood and depression. How it's linked and like, wow, could
It's absolutely linked.
yes,
And keep in mind, big food industry, big tobacco, big technology. I'm holding up my smartphone here.
yeah,
Have learned how to create products that drive overconsumption. Overconsumption of foods that are
Mm,
harmful to us, overconsumption of sitting,
yeah.
so that we are ignoring our family, our spouse, our learning, our job to overconsume the technology in ways that are harmful to us.
Mm,
Uh, and they're very good at marketing to our children to get our children hooked on these harmful foods. Very good at marketing to our children to get them hooked on social media, to the harms of our children. So
mhm.
I think it's helpful for families who will talk to their children about marketing and how they're being marketed to
Yeah.
for the profit of the companies at the expense of their health.
Don't believe everything you hear.
Yes,
Mm,
and that products are designed to make you addicted.
yeah. Good point. Wow. I love how this is brilliant. This is classic because I love how we've gone off piste already. We haven't even started, and you've
Yeah.
dropped truth bombs. I mean, when I advise clients to have fermented foods, I say, have a tablespoon of sauerkraut a day. But I just love how you're just like, no, 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 no. Try cups of
Right.
fermented foods a day.
You start with a
Truth bomb.
forkful, and the goal is, can you get to those 6 servings?
Mm,
And if it takes you a decade, that's fine. If it takes you 6 months to a year, that's fine. And just think about mixing it into the rest of your meal. And what you'll find is by adding it to your salads and your soups and your stews, you can, discover that it adds a lovely flavor to your chili.
mm,
It adds a
yeah,
lovely flavor to your fish chowder. It adds a lovely flavor to the casserole or hot
yeah.
dish that you just made.
Yeah, I find kind of vinegary, kind of salty flavors like they balance meals very well. Like, and it's a vital component anyway. Like having that
Yeah.
kind of sharp flavor, so it kind of balances out meals. So it's good from a flavor point of view, like you just said. Yeah.
And the flavors that we enjoy are an acquired taste.
Mm,
Many of your listeners might enjoy coffee, which is quite bitter.
yep.
They might enjoy tea, which can be bitter. And but we developed a taste and appreciation for that taste.
Mm,
Many cultures like really hot, spicy foods with a
mm,
lot of ginger or garlic or pepper, cayenne. And again, that's very much an acquired taste.
mhm,
And, when I was young, I could not tolerate spicy, zippy food. But, having a sibling and older brothers, you're like, well, I'm not going to be outdone by my older brothers. And so, I would eventually become more adventuresome.
yep. Well, I have to say, growing up myself as well, my dad used to feed me curries, spicy curries, and I'd hate it in the beginning, but you do get
Get
used
used
to
to
it.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so wow, already learned so much. Thanks for that, Dr. Terry. But let's dive in to what we're going to talk about today, which is about
Sure.
you, your story, and the Wahls Protocol and what you recommend people to be eating, doing, how they should be living. So, first of all, I think most people listening have probably seen your name on the podcast and they know who you are and they just click it because they're like, "Yep, I want to see what Terry is talking about." But for anybody who doesn't know who you are, you have an extremely
A
remarkable,
remarkable story.
a very miraculous
Hmm.
story about your personal health journey. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So let's to have it in real time. 23 years ago, out walking with my wife Jackie, a half mile from home, my left leg grows weak. Dragging it, I hobble home. When I see the neurologist, he says, Terry, this could be bad or really, really bad. So for the next 3 weeks, I go through the test. And at night, I think about the 20 years I've already experienced of worsening electrical face pain. I don't want to become disabled. So I pray secretly for a fatal diagnosis. I get the diagnosis, multiple sclerosis. I do my research. I find the best MS center in the country. I see their best physician. I take the newest drugs. 3 years later, I hear tilt, recline, wheelchair. My face pains relentlessly worsen. My 10-year-old daughter hugs me as tears stream down my face. I ask myself, am I doing all that I can? I go to PubMed and I begin reading the research studies about Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, MS. I decide that mitochondrial dysfunction are the drivers of disability. I create a supplement cocktail to support my mitochondria. The speed of my decline slows. I discover a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed. I asked my physical therapist, can I try that? He calls it e-stim. He says it's for athletes. But he does give me a test session. It hurts bad, really quite bad. But when it's over, I feel great. He says it's because the e-stim causes relief of the endorphins. We add e-stim to my physical therapy. I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. They have a course on neuroprotection, which I take. I have a longer list of supplements for my mitochondria, which I add. Then I have a really big aha. And tomorrow I'm embarrassed now by how long it took me to have this aha. Like, what if I redesign my paleo diet that I've already been following for 5 years based on this list of supplements? That's a longer, more research. I figure out this new, very structured paleo diet, and I started eating this way. On December 26th, now at that time, I am so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. I can walk just a few steps using 2 walking sticks. I have severe fatigue. Although my mind is still clear, I am beginning to have brain fog. And so I know I'm on the brink of needing to apply for medical disability. My electrical face pain has been relentlessly worse, but I start this new way of eating. And I should also say at that point, I'm so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair. My knees are higher than my nose. I'm in a zero gravity chair when I staff the resident clinic, when I'm eating at home, and when I'm with my family. I start this new way of eating December 26th. By the end of January, it's clear that my brain fog is less, my mental clarity is improved, my fatigue is less. My physical therapist says, Terry, you are getting stronger. And he advances my exercises. I can now do 10 minutes twice a day. And then I begin walking with 2 walking sticks, and then with no walking sticks. And then on Mother's Day, we have to have an emergency family meeting because I want to try riding my bike for the first time in 6 years.
I love this part of the story, by the way. Carry on.
Yeah. So Jackie tells my 16-year-old boy, who's 6'5", Zach, you run alongside on the left. She tells my 13-year-old daughter, Zebby, you run alongside on the right. She'll follow. We get in position, and I push off. My bike wobbles, but I catch my balance, and I bike around the block. That 16-year-old boy, he's crying. The 13-year-old girl, she's crying. Jackie's crying. And when I tell that story, I begin to cry because it was at that moment that how I understood disease and health changed. Who knew how much recovery might be possible? Because the current understanding of progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete. And I began biking a little bit more every day. And then in October, Jackie said, let's sign you up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles. However far you go will be a triumph. And we signed me up. And when I crossed that finish line once again, my children are crying, Jackie's crying, I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes the way I practice medicine. It will change the focus of my research. And I've since made it my mission to teach the public and clinicians that there is much that we can do, that even if your physicians say you have untreatable disease, that worsening disability is all you can hope for, they may be wrong. That doing all that you can to improve how your cells do the biology of life may lead to stunning results.
Gosh, that's a powerful story. And It's what you experienced, going from wheelchair bound to riding bikes, and like that's a huge paradigm shift, and it can change the
Yeah.
world, and that's basically what you're doing at the moment.
So in 2007, I can't sit up. I can sit up in a regular chair for just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That is, if I do longer than that, I can't function for about 48 hours. And that's the definition of being bedridden.
Mm.
You can't sit up longer than 10 minutes. It's good that I didn't know that at the time. That would have been way too depressing. Now, the other thing that I want people to know is, so that's my life in 2007. By 2008, my neurologist agreed to let me taper and discontinue my disease modifying drugs. And I continued to work, I continued to train, I continued to do my electrical stimulation of muscles very intensively. And now, this morning I did a brisk mile and a half Nordic walking, hiking, high intensity workout. I jog in the neighborhood. I went to the Rocky Mountain National Park here in the United States at the end of May and did hiking for 3 hours out there in the wild. And I was hiking up at 12,000 feet
Wow.
in the snow. Now, I wasn't using snowshoes, so I was just hiking the snow on packed trails. And, in 2007, I could not sit up, folks. There is
Yeah.
hope for you.
Yeah.
And in 2007, I completely believe that progressive MS did not improve. I
Hmm.
was doing all that I did not to improve, because I knew you couldn't improve with secondary progressive MS. I did all of that just to hold things a little bit slower,
Mm.
just so that my children, who had been watching me since they were 5 and 8, knew that I was doing all that I could. I was doing everything that I could to make my life a little bit better, because I knew that they were going to have terrible disappointments, terrible setbacks, and that you either give up when you have terrible setbacks, or you just say, "Yep, life's tough, and I'm going to keep doing all that I can anyway."
Hmm. Do you work with a range of autoimmune conditions? Obviously you focus on MS, but I remember reading in your book that when it comes to autoimmunity, and actually for most of us, we all share the same issues at the core. So we all have the
Yeah,
same disease, really, when you look at
we
the
all have the
absolute
same
core.
disease.
Yeah.
It's accelerated oxidative stress, excess activation of your innate immune system.
Hmm.
We have a microbiome that's been disrupted. Our hormone signals have been disrupted,
Mm.
and we have maladaptive lifestyles.
Right.
So I help people address their lifestyle,
Yeah.
make them more health supportive at a pace that they and their family can manage. And then we do some testing to tweak things. And keep in mind, for my clinical practice, when I was going through all of this, was in the Veteran Affairs medical system here in the United States.
Hmm.
We had very basic labs that I could do. No fancy functional medicine testing. I could do fasting lipids, glucose, hemoglobin A1C, uh, folate, B12, homocysteine.
Hmm.
Sometimes eventually got to doing insulin. That was it. Very basic labs.
Hmm.
And I had very basic supplements, a multivitamin, cod liver oil, a B complex.
Hmm.
Like that was it, folks. But I could talk to people, help them understand their life events, their environmental factors, and that we could do lifestyle interventions as a family.
Hmm.
And we did group classes, and we had extraordinary results. Now, at the time, as I was using these principles tomorrow, there was part of me that was really annoyed that I couldn't do all this functional medicine testing. I mean, I really was put out by it. On the other hand, like, okay, I could be grouse about it, or I could just do the best that I could given my reality. So I just did, like, okay, I'll just do the best I can given my reality. And what I learned was I got extraordinary results. And the price of admission was that you would have to come to my group classes and you'd have to commit to doing my program for 100 days.
Mhm.
And if you weren't ready to do that, that's fine. I could send you to work with a dietitian or the psychologist or the physical therapist,
Mhm.
and you could come back when you're ready to commit to 100 days at 100%. And I never argued with folks that, I realize this may not be the right time for you, that, you've got too much going on.
Yep.
Your kids have their health challenges. Your spouse has her work challenges. And so come back when it is the right time. And we had extraordinary results.
Yep.
So, yep, you could spend lots of money, get some really cool testing, and you get some really cool supplements. And yes, you could go faster. And if you could get organic food exclusively, you could recover faster. But my people that I took care of were living on food stamps in
Mhm.
small rural Iowa, Illinois, with small local grocery stores, and they were getting canned vegetables and frozen vegetables, and they were hunting or fishing,
Mhm. And then
and
still,
they still
yeah.
got extraordinary results.
It's so refreshing, and it's so hopeful, because anybody listening to this who is struggling with an autoimmune condition, who believes that this is it, it's just going to get worse and worse over time. The medications are piling on, medication for the medication for the medication. um, I have clients like that, and
Oh yeah.
it's really refreshing to know that, in your program, the Wahls Protocol, you say 100 days, 100%, and you will get
and
some
and
sort of
and,
result.
and things will begin to improve now.
Right.
And what I saw in my clinical trials, I would say 65 to 75% of people have a clinically meaningful reduction in fatigue, improvement in quality of life. So
Mhm.
not everyone responds.
Yeah.
In my clinics at the VA with those very basic labs, is pretty consistently 80% of people had remarkable improvements within 100 days.
Mm.
In my private practice, where, yeah, people have more money, we can do more testing, they can get fancier supplements, they can get organic food, and now we can see 90% response rate. I still can't get 100%.
Yeah.
And I have places where I send folks who need more intensive technologies than what I can organize for them.
Mm.
There are no interventions that are ever 100% perfect.
Right.
You can create an intervention that's 100% fatal.
Mm.
That we can do, but there are no treatments that are 100% successful for every disease. There are things that can help people,
Mhm.
and help more and more people, uh, but nothing will ever be 100%, unless we're
And
trying to kill people, and that you can create 100%
and
fatality rates.
and so, I mean, this probably rides off what you've just said, but is it possible for someone to recover from autoimmune disease, or is their immune system always going to be activated? Like, it's just once it's done, it's
Okay,
done.
so we'll take me as an example.
Mhm.
I'm dramatically better, so I can
I
jog, I
can
can
see
hike,
that. Like, you're bright, you're like just energetic.
remarkably
It's
better.
like, yeah.
But I'm still not, completely normal yet.
Hmm.
I can jog, I can't run, I yeah, but remarkably better.
Mm.
If I came to your house and you accidentally gave me gluten, so I had regular pasta or whole wheat bread, I would have in 6 to 8 hours incapacitated. I'd be incapacitated with pain. Uh, yeah, and if I had dairy at your place, and you gave me some lovely cheese, or a glass of milk, raw milk, whatever. It might taste delicious, but again, in 6 to 8 hours, I would have incapacitating pain. And pasture raised eggs, totally delicious, love them. Again, I would have incapacitating pain. And so that is part of my heritage.
Mhm.
If I don't take care of myself and I have terrible sleep, too much stress, I do too many long haul flights,
Mm.
so too much toxin exposure,
Hmm.
again, it will turn on my pain.
Right.
So, yeah, I have to take care of myself.
Mm.
As long as I take care of myself, I'm in great shape.
Yeah.
If I get exposed to food, toxin, stress, it will activate my immune system and my trigeminal neuralgia will turn on. My neurologist and I joke, and I say, I have a continuous inflammation monitor in my trigeminal nerve. I will always know the status of my microglia. Are they happy? Are they in the M1 pissed off, inflamed, reactive state, or in the alternative reactive anti-inflammation state? If my sensation on my face is normal and I have no pain, I'm alternatively active.
Yeah.
So the anti-inflammation. If my sensation is a little bit off and I begin to have those twinges, I know I'm in the reactive state.
A good way of looking at it.
And
It's like, I'm
so
actually quite lucky. I have this sensor inside that tells me I'm doing something right or doing something wrong.
something wrong. It's been extremely helpful. And so in my practice, I help people understand what is your
Mm.
biosensor? Is it your skin? Is it your vision? Is it tingling on your hands or feet? Is it poor coordination of your hands? Is it your foot drop?
Mm.
In my face, it's my face pain. For some folks, it's their anxiety level, their depression level. Now, mental health is difficult because we typically don't have very good insight. So
Mm.
now I'm going to have to rely on my spouse saying, honey, you are just way too crabby for normal for you. Um, but if I can get people to be dialed into their biosensor, now I can say, my biosensor's turned on. What was the trigger?
Mm.
Or I could say, wow, my biosensor has turned down. What's the trigger for this really great day? What am I doing so right that I should do more of this?
And do you find there's a delay, like by a couple of days or a day, or does it happen immediately?
Um, well, if it's an IgE response, anaphylaxis, that happens immediately.
Okay.
If it is a delayed response, now that can be 6 to 24 to 72 hours.
Okay.
And so when it's 24 to 72 hours, that is much harder for people to identify.
Yeah.
When it's 6 to 24 hours, that's easier to identify.
Hmm.
Sometimes, in my programs, we do a lot of training to help people track this
Yeah.
and learn to become more aware of those subtle symptoms. That's called interoception.
Hmm.
And that's a skill, it's a teachable skill. Uh, but as you learn how to become aware of these bodily sensations, then it becomes much easier to say, these are the modifiable lifestyle factors that increase my health and vitality.
Hmm.
These are the factors that are sort of the warning that things are not going to go well, and I want to reduce those activities.
I mean, that
Or
could
you could
go,
spend a
yeah.
lot of money and get an Aura ring, and you track the numerically, and that works too. And some people want to do gadgets and gizmos,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Mm.
And I have patients who want to do that, and I love working with data. But
Yeah.
also, we taught people in the VA, again, my folks living on food stamps, how to do that just by paying attention, and they
Mm.
had extraordinary results. So it depends on you, what your resources are and what you're interested in doing.
Yeah, because this doesn't just go for people who are struggling with autoimmunity. This could go for anybody. If someone has, bad skin, or if they have gut pain, or, just listening to your body's triggers and like tracking the last day or two or three.
Correct. And what I think can be most helpful is you pick one symptom that you're going to chase at a time.
Mm,
So maybe I want to chase my skin. Maybe I want to chase my mental alertness.
mm,
Maybe I want to chase my irritability. Maybe I want to chase my joint pain or my energy level. So at the beginning, I would pick the symptom that is most impactful for you,
mhm,
and that's the one that you zero in on. And then when you feel like, okay, I got that one fairly well in hand, now I'm going to chase the next symptom.
mm. That's a good way to look at it. And it kind of simplifies things because so many of us kind of think, oh, these things just happen. Like, oh, I just have bad skin, or I just have gut pain, or I just have this autoimmune problem. A lot of people don't actually trace it back to an actual cause that they could actually maybe have some control over.
Well, if we look at the map of biochemistry, which gets more and more complicated every year, we get deeper understanding, but it's deeply interconnected, which allows us to keep all of the elements of biochemistry within safety parameters. And what I want people to know is that, yes, everything is deeply interconnected, and it's interconnected with how we run our lives. I built the Wahls Protocol, and my way of thinking about this is how we can gradually shift my health behaviors away from disease promoting to more health supporting, behavior by behavior, small little change by small little change that we
Mm,
are open to doing. And because my biochemistry is so deeply interconnected, what we often discover is, my fatigue, that is getting less. My mental clarity, well, that is improving. And, my husband is nowhere near as annoying as he was last month. And the guys come and say, Doc, you didn't tell me that my love life would come back and that Peter would start working again. And,
Peter.
and it all happened because we just gradually tweaked
Hmm.
their behaviors one small achievable step at a time.
Yep. So many people. So if someone grabbed hold of your book, I mean, I've got it here. I just wanted to have a quick refresh before we were
Oh, I
on
love
this
that. Yeah.
call. I love it. It's great because you can kind of use it for reference. It's like obviously I can't read it all the way through, but I'll go from chapter. I want to read about gluten, so I'll just go to the bit about gluten, and then I'll go to the
Yeah.
different parts. So it's really good for that. But so many people, the Wahls Protocol, it basically is 3 stages mainly, and then I think there's a fourth stage for
Mm-hmm.
if someone's to do elimination diet. But there's 3 stages, and they get progressively more. What's the word for that?
Well, there are a few more steps in each
Yeah, there's a few
stage.
more
Yeah.
steps in each stage, yeah. And so many people would be tempted to dive in straight away. Like just, I know in your clinical trials, that's probably what people need to do in order to,
Well,
do the program.
um,
But for a normal person, they'll probably find it quite hard to
yeah,
dive straight in.
yeah. In my clinic, I will see someone say, okay, given your circumstances, this is the intervention, the diet that I think would be most helpful, and we could start there if that's where you want to start. But it's also fine to start at a more realistic, smaller step.
Mm,
So let me know what's your preference. And I have some folks who are miserable enough to like, you know what, I'm ready,
mm,
and they go immediately all in. More commonly, it's like, you know what, I need a smaller step, and then we have a conversation like, okay, so realistically, what would that be for you? Would that be Wahls level 1, or do you want to do a Mediterranean, or do you want to do a gluten-free Mediterranean, or are we just going to start eating more vegetables?
right.
And depending on the person, they might even say, or do we have to do something away from food entirely, and we're going to
Mm,
work on stress or exercise first?
mm, right.
And for some folks, food's too hard. They have to work on stress and exercise
Mm,
to get some of their inflammation down first. And then we can begin as a family to talk about what we're going to add, what we're going to reduce or eliminate as a family,
Mhm.
because the interventions we do together, we can be successful at. The intervention I do by myself while I watch everyone else continue, I'll struggle. And I point out, if you're an alcoholic and everyone in your family is still drinking beer and wine and having whiskey on the table, well, do you think you'll be able to stop drinking alcohol successfully? And they'll go, well, no, of course not. That's why whatever we're going to do for you, we want your eating environment to support you. So we pick changes that you can implement for your eating environment
Mhm.
at a pace that you can be successful. And your family can get to eat what they want to eat, but we're going to agree what your eating environment will look like. So it might mean that they go out for their special meal of the flavors that they want to continue having that you can't have away from you, or you go out for a special time with your friends and your family eats their special meal that you can't have at
Mhm.
home when you're not there, and they clean it all up and air out the house so you don't have to smell it when you get back. So, and if people
Team
can't
effort.
do that,
Mm.
then it might be a reflection that there are too many hurts and wounds in that family that have to be addressed. They need family therapy to get the communication working again, or to acknowledge that the relationship is so broken that another arrangement needs to be made.
So I suppose the next natural question is the Wahls Protocol. Obviously, there's an entire book about
Yeah.
the Wahls Protocol and what to eat. But in a nutshell, if someone was listening, they're like, "Oh my God, okay, so I need to do this right now. Like, what do I need to
So,
do? Give me the lowdown."
so the first thing is that we want you to have more non-starchy vegetables.
Hmm.
And so green leafy vegetables, cabbage family, onion family, mushroom family, more deeply colored things like beets, carrots, berries. Sufficient protein, and we have meat eating versions and vegetarian versions. And then I recommend gluten free, dairy free, egg free, because those are the three most common unrecognized food sensitivities.
Hmm.
That's the starting point. However, if that's too hard, then we just have you work on the adds and not worry about the subtractions.
Right.
And maybe that's a Mediterranean diet.
Mm.
Again, we need to
Like
find out.
vegetables, but then keeping some of the grains and.
So add the vegetables, do whole grains,
Mm.
and try and reduce the sugar. Now, yes, taking gluten, dairy, and eggs out, I think would be super helpful. But I do caution people that it people will be much more successful if you do your ads first.
Mhm.
So you're going to add the vegetables, and people like I can't imagine 9 cups of vegetables because they're not subtracting any the 5 to 10 servings of flour-based products that they have every day.
Mm.
So what I'm telling you is replace the flour-based products with vegetables, one serving at a time. So add a serving of vegetables, take away a serving of grain. So get 3 servings of vegetables, take away a couple servings of grain, and you keep working your way up to 9 servings of vegetables. By
Yeah.
the time you get to 9 servings of vegetables, you don't have much grain left because to get all those vegetables in, you had to take away a lot of the grain, and that makes that whole process much easier.
That's right.
But focus on the ads first, and you're replacing the grain products with vegetables.
But what I found quite powerful about your program, and I think what probably stands out to most people, is you don't just say eat more vegetables because that's what we all say. We all say, "Oh, eat more vegetables, half your plate vegetables." We kind of, but in your program, you say a specific amount.
Right.
You say,
So
so how much vegetables
so
are we
the
talking
the the
here?
United K folks, you're all like, so how many grams is that, Dr. Wahls? How many grams?
That
So
is
what I'm
not a
gonna
British
have
accent, by the way. That
all
was
right, all right.
awful.
So if you take your dinner plate
Mm.
and you cover it so you can't see the bottom, that's 3 cups.
Mm.
And so think of this as you have a plate full of vegetables before you have your protein. and before you have any grain products.
Mhm.
And you have 3 platefuls per day.
Right.
Now that's a lot. So at first, I want you to get 1 plateful of vegetables. When you get that down, then you go to 2 platefuls of vegetables. When you get that down, you go to 3.
Right.
Now, if you're very petite, and I'm a tall lady, 6 foot tall, and if you're a man, you should be able to get 3 platefuls of vegetables. If you're a very petite lady, maybe it's only 2 platefuls of vegetables.
Right. But that's how many vegetables we're talking, people. Like, that's how many. And that's what worked for you. That's what helped
And
you
that's
get
what worked
out
for
of,
me.
yeah.
And in my practice, for my men and women veterans, I'd say, okay, you're going to be replacing the grains, the breads, cereals, pastas, with vegetables.
Hmm.
And so you get at least 1 plateful of vegetables every day. Then you get 2 platefuls of vegetables. And after you've had your 2 platefuls of vegetables, yes, you could have some grain products. And then after you've done that for a couple of weeks, then you get 3 platefuls of vegetables. Then you could have grain products. And then they come back and say, "Yo, doc, I don't have any room for the grain products." I said, "Yes, that's the point.
Ta-da! Gotcha.
That's the point."
Um, so I have a burning question that I want to ask you about gluten, dairy products, and eggs.
Yes.
Do you think that food preparation and quality has anything to do with how people are sensitive to it? So, for example, if someone has raw dairy, does that make a difference to the
Well,
to the
so
sensitivity?
for 200 million years, mammals have been using dairy,
Mhm.
lactation, milk from our breast, to raise our young. It's very effective for growing infants very well.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of growth factors in milk. Once your growth plates fuse in adolescence, those growth factors can make you grow fat,
Mhm.
not so good for us, and can make you grow precancer and cancer, also not so good for us.
Mhm.
And more casein is associated with higher rates of dysplasia, polyps, and cancers. I would not want to have those. I don't want to have insulin resistance. I don't want to have metabolic syndrome or diabetes. I
Mhm.
think those are great reasons to not have dairy products.
Mhm.
Now, does having fermented dairy, as in yogurts, kefirs, and cheese, break down those growth factors? That's a question I don't have the answer to. Maybe.
Right. Right.
So yes, sheep and goat and camel milk may be somewhat less inflammatory than cow's milk, but they still have the growth factors. You still have the risk of insulin resistance and cancers, precancers.
Right. Right.
So it's an experiment. You can do that if you so choose. I choose not to.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose everybody's different, and the way that dairy is produced these days, it's no wonder that people have so many issues with it. But what you're saying is, well, there's still some issues, even if you're getting the best quality raw dairy. It still has its risks for some people. Is that
For
right? Yeah.
for 200 million years, we've used it to grow our yogs. As soon
Yeah.
as the animals weaned, you never got it.
Mm.
For 8,000 years, it's been used, and yes, it does have some nutritional value. And so, people get to eat what they want. If you want to eat dairy, eat dairy. If you want to eat sugar and processed foods, eat it.
Yeah.
Here are the reasons why I choose not to.
Yeah, I see. I see. So, be aware of, the facts that are out there and make an informed choice as to,
Correct.
whether you do it or not. Yeah. Um, so I've got a whole list of questions here that I'm just looking at here. So I'm on the functional medicine journey. I think I've done 3 courses out of 7 so far. So I had the pleasure of watching you on the oh God, I've forgotten the
Bioenergetics.
yeah, that's it, bioenergetics course. Yeah. And you did a fabulous presentation in the break about the ketogenic diet, and I was just writing notes and notes and notes. So, what I wanted to ask you about the keto is that something that you would recommend for someone who is casually just wanting to be healthy, or would you
No,
recommend for someone who just has a
no, no,
problem to
no, no.
solve?
I think if you're going to be in a keto diet, it can be very helpful as an adjunct for cancer.
Right.
It can be helpful for cognitive decline. From an evolutionary standpoint, we're in ketosis on the basis of exercise. It wasn't on the basis of a high fat diet. And we historically were in ketosis because of exercise, because it took that much exercise to get our food. Then we had a couple of days of plentiful food,
Hmm.
a little higher in protein, still fairly lower carb. And then we had to go back out and work really hard to get our food again. So, what I think from an evolutionary standpoint is metabolic flexibility.
Right.
Being in ketosis for several days, being out of ketosis for a couple days, then being back in ketosis for several days, then being out of ketosis. We never had continuous eating. We never had a high carb diet.
Because you say that for you prefer to be in ketosis
I prefer
seasonally.
to do metabolic flexibility. So I love being in ketosis and I
Yeah.
love the refed state.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so keto kind of cycling in and out, like that's
Yes.
probably the safest way to do it. So when it comes to some of the key foods in the Wahls Protocol, obviously there's a whole list of them that you don't have to go through. But are there any that you think you must know about this?
Well, we've gone over that with level one. That's where everyone should start, and then things can get a little bit more um, um, prescriptive in terms of why I like liver, heart,
Mm,
and organ meats, bone broths. Why I like fermented foods. Why I think that could be super helpful in that flipping between ketosis and a refed state can be super helpful.
okay. So just to wrap up then, that was a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. I know people could just find you online. They just type in your name and everything's there. But is there any place that you prefer people to find you?
So come to terrywahls.com, Terry, Walls, WAHLS.com, and follow me on Instagram at drterrywalls.com. And yeah, I'm not sure when this is going to be released, but
Next week, I
July.
think.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So between July 5 and 11, I'm doing the MS and Neuroimmune Summit. So be sure and sign up for that. I interview 50 folks talking about the many things that we can do to better control our symptoms and our self care, to better improve our quality of life. It's going to be absolutely fabulous. And tomorrow I'll get you connect you with the Dr. Talks team so you can give them all the appropriate assets.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Perfect. Well, thank you, Dr. Terry Walls. That was so lovely. And yeah, I hope we can do this again soon.
All right. Take care, my friend. Good luck now.
Thanks.